The Army teaches you how to read terrain, spot movement where others see shadows, and stay silent when your instincts scream to run. Recon is patience. Recon is trust in your gut. But nothing in Ranger School, nothing in years of crawling through mud with a rifle, nothing in all the firefights and quiet jungle nights prepared me for the battlefield that was my own kitchen table. It was 0600. Rain ticked against the window. My boots were still damp from the pre-dawn run when I saw it, just a slip of paper sitting next to the coffee pot. No return address, no preamble, just 10 words in my wife's handwriting. I'm upgrading to someone younger and better in bed. Goodbye. 8 years of marriage gone in one sentence. Her side of the bed hadn't been slept in. The closet was stripped bare. Jewelry box missing. Even the emergency cash I kept tucked inside the gun safe was gone. Lydia hadn't left quietly, she'd evacuated like a retreating army, taking supplies, valuables, and a piece of my dignity on her way out. I read the note twice, folded it once, set it down by my mug. And here's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. Sometimes under the sting there's relief, because the lies were heavier than the truth. The past year had been fraying. Lydia's shopping sprees turned into business lunches. Her evenings home turned into nights out she never explained. Her phone never left her hand. And whenever I pressed, she snapped, accusing me of being paranoid, of letting deployments make me suspicious of everything. In my line of work, suspicion keeps you alive. But in marriage it was killing us slowly. I walked to the window. The driveway was empty, her car gone. The house echoed too quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum sounded louder, filling the silence she'd left behind. My phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Raymond Halloway, my father-in-law. A man built of iron and respect, who'd commanded troops in Europe before retiring to run his defense logistics company. Everything okay with you too? Lydia called last night, sounded upset. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keys. What could I say? That his daughter had just detonated my life like an IED in a jungle trail? That she'd slipped out while I was sleeping, leaving a note sharper than any blade? Instead I typed, "We'll figure it out." But I knew better. This wasn't a bump in the road. This was an ambush. And something in my gut told me Lydia hadn't just left me, she'd left scorched earth behind, and the worst was yet to come. I poured another cup of coffee, the bitter taste anchoring me. The note sat there like a silent enemy. Not just cruel. Calculated. Planned. 8 years together, and I realized I hadn't lost her this morning. I'd been losing her piece by piece for months. This was just the final cut. And as every soldier knows, the first cut is just the beginning of the fight. You don't notice the cracks at first. Not when you're married to someone you believe in, someone you promised the rest of your life to. The cracks hide in the laughter, in the routines, in the way she kissed me goodbye before deployment. But looking back, I see them clear as sniper scope glass. Lydia had always been restless with money. Swipe the card, deal with the bill later. Maxed out balances explained away with a smile and a half-hearted promise. I'll do better next month. I'd cover the shortfalls, shuffle paychecks, make excuses to her father when creditors called the house. I told myself it was just a bad habit, not a red flag. But 6 months ago it changed. Her nights grew longer, her explanations shorter. She'd step outside to take phone calls, whispering into the receiver until headlights swept across the driveway and I knew she was coming back in. When I'd ask where she'd been, she'd snap, "Don't interrogate me, Noah. You're not in uniform here." I let it go. I was tired of fighting. And part of me feared the truth of what I might find if I pressed harder. Deployment had its own weight. I'd be halfway around the world, deep in a jungle where silence meant survival, and still my thoughts would drift to her. Was she okay? Was she faithful? I'd catch myself staring at the sat phone, tempted to call at odd hours just to hear her voice. Sometimes she'd answer, distracted, irritated, saying she was busy with errands, or helping a friend. And then there were the questions. Little probes scattered across conversations like reconnaissance patrols. She'd ask about Colonel Halloway's business, about accounts, about how military pay was structured. Questions that seemed casual in the moment but, in hindsight, were data points. She wasn't chatting, she was gathering intel. The colonel had noticed too. A year ago he'd pulled me aside at his office. "You're steady, Noah. That's why I trust you." He'd shown me a restricted procurement account, nearly $200,000 earmarked for new equipment. Only he and I had access. Not Lydia. Not Caleb, her brother. Not anyone else. He'd leaned across the desk, voice low. "Don't mention this to her. She's been asking too many questions. She doesn't need to know everything." I promised him I'd keep it quiet. And I did. But Lydia had her ways. She'd dig through my desk when she thought I was asleep. I caught her once, fingers rifling through folders. She laughed it off, looking for a pen. I wanted to believe her. The Army drills patience into you, but patience is a double-edged sword. It teaches you to wait for the right shot. But in marriage, that patience can turn into silence, into avoidance, into giving someone enough rope to hang you with. By the time I rotated back from my last deployment, the distance between us was more than miles. It was the silence at the dinner table. The way she turned her phone face down. The way her smile never reached her eyes. I should have seen it. I should have recognized the signs. But a soldier learns to trust his unit, and I trusted my wife like I trusted my brothers in the field. And just like in war, betrayal never comes from the enemy you're watching. It comes from the ally standing next to you. So when I found that note on the counter, I wasn't just blindsided. I was ambushed by the truth I'd been ignoring for far too long. At first I thought the note was the end of it. Cruel words, a clean break, the kind of betrayal you can ball up and burn in the sink. But Lydia was never one to walk away without making sure she left scorched earth behind. The first hit came at 0900. My phone buzzed with a fraud alert from the bank. Suspicious withdrawal of $7,500. Please confirm if this is you. I frowned. Wrong account number. I didn't recognize it. Must have been a scam call. I hung up. 10 minutes later, another. This time from a different bank. Unauthorized charges. A credit card opened under my name, spending spree at luxury stores downtown. Nordstrom, Tiffany's, an Apple store. The rep on the line asked me for confirmation. Sir, this card was opened 3 months ago. You're the primary holder. But the authorized user. I cut her off. Who? Lydia Strickland. The words hit harder than any bullet I'd ever taken. She hadn't just left me. She was tearing through my name, my credit, my identity like it was Tinder. By noon, 3 more calls. Unauthorized accounts. Cash advances. A jewelry purchase flagged at nearly $12,000. Lydia wasn't running, she was launching a campaign. And I knew why. She thought money would break me faster than leaving. She thought draining accounts was the kill shot. But the worst came at 1,300 hours. The call wasn't from my bank. It was from Colonel Holloway. His voice was taut, controlled rage behind every syllable. Noah. I just got off the phone with my bank. Someone's been making large withdrawals from the restricted account. 50 grand this morning. Another 40 just now. The bank says whoever did it had all the account information. Cold sweat ran down my back. That account wasn't supposed to exist outside of him and me. Procurement funds strictly for expansion. Machinery, jobs, contracts. Lydia didn't even know about it. Or so I thought. She's been going through my desk, I said slowly. My files. Maybe even my laptop. The colonel didn't reply for a long time. Finally, you're telling me my daughter just stole from her own father? I didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, sir. She thought she was stealing from me. She doesn't realize what she's done. The silence on the line was heavier than any rucksack I'd ever carried. At 1400, I was sitting across from the colonel in the branch manager's office. A grainy feed played on the monitor, security footage from 3 different banks. There was Lydia, sunglasses on, sliding her ID across the counter, smiling at the tellers as if she owned the world, walking out with envelopes fat with cash. 80,000 in 3 hours, the manager said, sweating behind his glasses. She had all the right details, account numbers, security codes, even your mother's maiden name. We assumed she was authorized. The colonel's face was carved granite. She wasn't. Freeze it. File the report. The manager shifted uncomfortably. We've already contacted federal authorities. Because of the nature of the funds, this may fall under embezzlement statutes. Especially if it's tied to defense contracts. The colonel turned to me, eyes burning. She thought she was hurting you. Instead, she may have just committed a federal crime against me. I didn't have an answer. All I had was the image of her walking out of those banks, calm as a ghost, carrying cash that was never hers. And in that moment I knew, this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. The colonel wasn't a man who raised his voice. In the army, he commanded respect not with volume but with presence. Men straightened when he entered a room, not because he barked orders, but because they knew he'd walk through fire before asking them to. But that afternoon in the bank manager's office, I saw something different in him. Not command. Not control. Just raw, hollowed-out shock. He sat stiff in the chair, staring at the grainy footage of his daughter withdrawing stack after stack of bills, her smile careless, her hand steady. That money? His voice was low, almost a whisper. That money wasn't just sitting there. It was payroll for next quarter. It was machinery we already had quotes on. It was 12 new jobs. Families depending on those checks. The manager cleared his throat, fiddling with papers. Colonel, we've frozen the account. But as of now, she's withdrawn roughly 120,000. There's about 40 left. The colonel rubbed his temples, the weight of it pressing his shoulders down. I'd seen him carry rucksacks heavier than some men, but this was crushing him. I tried to steady my voice. She doesn't know. She thought she was draining me. She thought it was revenge against her husband, not sabotage against her father. His eyes snapped to mine, sharp as broken glass. You think that makes it better, Sergeant? I swallowed hard. No, sir. He stood abruptly, pacing the small office. I warned her for years. Credit cards, car payments, overdrafts, I covered it all. I told myself it was grief, losing her mother so young. I thought she'd grow out of it. But this. He gestured toward the frozen monitor. Lydia's face paused mid-smirk as she slid another ID across a counter. This is theft. This is betrayal. The manager hesitated, then added, given the scope of funds and the fact that they were tied to government contracts, federal authorities will likely get involved. We'll have to notify them. There may be embezzlement charges. The colonel nodded grimly. Do what you need to do. When we walked outside, the late afternoon sun felt harsher, heavier. The colonel stopped by his truck, leaning one hand on the door. He looked older in that moment, the fight drained out of him. Noah, he said quietly, I need you to understand something. She didn't just take money. She took trust. From me. From the men working in those plants. From every soldier expecting gear that money was going to pay for. I felt guilt gnaw at me. If I'd known she was digging through my files. He cut me off. This isn't your fault. You're not the one who turned my daughter into a thief. But you're the one she aimed to hurt. And because of that, the collateral damage landed on all of us. I stood there, fists clenched, staring at the asphalt. Recon teaches you to spot danger before it happens, to read the signs in the terrain. And yet in my own home, in my own marriage, I'd missed the ambush. The colonel climbed into his truck, but before shutting the door, he looked at me again, his eyes steel through the pain. She thought she could wound you by taking what you had. Instead, she wounded her own bloodline. And now she's going to find out what consequences really look like. Then he started the engine, the roar echoing like judgment. That night, the colonel called an emergency family meeting. His sister Marlene, her husband Joe, and Lydia's younger brother Caleb all gathered in the living room of the colonel's home, their faces tense, confused. They expected bad news, but not this. Not the kind that changes how you look at someone you thought you knew. The colonel didn't waste words. He stood by the fireplace, back straight, hands clasped behind him like he was delivering a briefing. Lydia stole from us. The words fell like a mortar. Silence followed, broken only by the tick of the mantel clock. Caleb blinked. Stole? From who? From me. From the company. From the men who work for us. His voice was steady, but I could hear the gravel under it. $120,000 withdrawn in less than a day. Marlene gasped, hand to her mouth. Joe muttered a curse under his breath. Caleb shot to his feet. No. No way. Lydia's reckless, sure, but she wouldn't. She would. The colonel's tone cut like steel. He pulled a folder from under his arm, laying bank statements and still images from surveillance footage across the coffee table. She thought she was hurting Noah. She believed the account was his. But it was mine. She didn't just betray her husband. She betrayed this family. Marlene leaned forward, eyes wide at the papers. This is insane. She's always been irresponsible, yes. But theft? From her own father? She's been dipping into accounts for nearly a year, the colonel said. A few thousand at a time. I mistook it for accounting errors. Today she got greedy. And now she's triggered an investigation that doesn't stop at family boundaries. Caleb paced the room, fists clenching and unclenching. So what happens now? You'll talk to her, right? Work this out. The colonel shook his head slowly. It's past that. I filed a police report this afternoon. The banks have already flagged the transactions. Federal authorities are being notified. This isn't a family squabble anymore. This is grand theft. The silence was heavier than any deployment bunker I'd ever sat in. They weren't just absorbing the crime. They were absorbing the reality that Lydia wasn't the victim in this story. She was the perpetrator. Joe finally spoke, his voice low. What about Noah? Every head turned toward me. I sat on the far end of the couch, hands clasped, a stranger in the middle of their grief. The colonel's eyes softened just slightly. Noah didn't do this. He's as much a victim as I am. She tried to ruin his life, and in the process she ruined her own. Marlene looked at me, sympathy flickering in her eyes. You're still family, Noah. Don't let this make you doubt that. But Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked torn, like a soldier ordered to fire on his own squad. She's my sister, he muttered, almost to himself. The colonel's voice cracked sharp. And she's a criminal. Don't mistake blood for loyalty. Loyalty is earned. She lost it the moment she walked into that bank. No one argued after that. The family sat in stunned silence, each of them realizing Lydia hadn't just burned her marriage, she torched every bridge she had. For me, the hardest part wasn't their shock. It was the realization that I wasn't the only casualty. Lydia's betrayal wasn't just aimed at me. It had wounded the people who had once welcomed me into their home, their Sunday dinners, their lives. And if there's one thing I've learned in both war and marriage, it's this. Betrayal doesn't end with the one you target. It bleeds into everyone who ever trusted you. By dawn the next day, the fraud alerts hadn't stopped. If anything, they multiplied. Spa retreats, boutique hotels, luxury boutiques. Lydia wasn't hiding. She was flaunting. And she wasn't alone. CID investigators pulled phone logs and credit card slips. Every one of them led to the same name, Captain Marcus Denton. A fellow officer, stationed comfortably at headquarters, the kind of man who loved mirrors almost as much as he loved shortcuts. I'd seen him around before deployments, perfect uniform, rehearsed charm, always too close when Lydia visited base. I should have trusted my gut back then. Now the receipts were in front of me. Marcus had checked into a Charleston suite under his name, Lydia tagged as spouse. They weren't being careful because they didn't think they needed to be. In their minds they'd already burned me down. But they hadn't counted on CID. Special Agent Karen Dwyer from the Criminal Investigation Division briefed us that morning. Her tone was clipped, efficient, the way soldiers are when they've seen it all. She's withdrawn over $120,000 in under 36 hours. Your father-in-law's company funds. That makes it federal. The colonel sat across from her, jaw locked, his knuckles white against the armrest. What happens next? We let her keep spending. Dwyer flipped through a folder of transactions. Every charge, every swipe, every hotel check-in is another nail in her coffin. Shows intent. Shows premeditation. And with Captain Denton involved, we've got military jurisdiction in play. This won't just be theft. It'll be conspiracy. The colonel nodded grimly. Do it. I sat silent, anger simmering like a storm I couldn't release. I'd crawled through swamps, lived off ration packs, stared through spotting scopes for days without moving. All so my wife could sit in a spa suite with another man, drinking champagne bought with stolen money. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was mockery. By afternoon, more charges hit. A diamond necklace from a jeweler in downtown Charleston, a luxury car rental, and a week-long spa package billed under Marcus Denton's officer ID. They weren't even subtle. They were daring the world to notice. And the world did. At 2,100 hours, CID set the trap. A coordinated sweep with local police, timed to the moment Lydia and Denton walked into the lobby of a boutique hotel, laughing, arms full of shopping bags. They didn't see the detectives until the cuffs were already on. The colonel and I got the call within the hour. Lydia had been booked for grand theft, fraud, and embezzlement. Denton for aiding and abetting, along with conduct unbecoming of an officer. The colonel's voice on the phone was flat. They've got her. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. What I felt was a soldier's cold recognition. The mission wasn't over. Capturing the target was just the beginning. The real battle was proving guilt beyond denial. And Lydia had always been a master of excuses, tears, and manipulation. But this time she wasn't just facing me. She was facing the army. Facing her father. Facing a system that didn't bend for crocodile tears. As I hung up the phone, I realized something that cut deeper than anything she'd done so far. She didn't just leave me for someone else. She didn't just rob me blind. She went to war against her own blood, her own name, her own legacy. And the Army doesn't forgive traitors. Neither does family. The Madison County Detention Center smelled like bleach and stale air. I'd walked into enough holding cells overseas to know the look of people when freedom had been ripped away from them. Lydia was no different. They led me into a small room divided by a scarred metal table. She was already there, dressed in an orange jumpsuit that made her look smaller, fragile in a way she never allowed before. Her hair was tied back, face pale, eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, she didn't look like the woman who'd left me with a cruel note. She looked like someone who'd already lost. Noah. Her voice cracked. Thank God you came. I didn't answer. I just sat down, hands clasped, waiting. She leaned forward, desperation seeping through every word. It's all a misunderstanding. I thought you were hiding money. I thought you were planning to leave me. Those accounts, I thought they were yours, that you were trying to cut me out. Her eyes darted to mine, searching for sympathy. I was hurt. Angry. I made a mistake. But you can fix this. Talk to my dad. Tell him I'll pay it all back. Please. You know he'll listen to you. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. Finally I spoke. You didn't steal from me. She blinked. What? I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. That account you drained? It wasn't mine. It was your father's. Procurement funds for his company. Money he set aside for jobs, for payroll, for contracts. You didn't just betray me, Lydia. You stole from your own blood. Her face went white, as if the concrete walls themselves had crushed in around her. No. That's not possible. It's fact. I pulled a folded printout from my pocket, sliding it across the table. Bank statements. Transaction logs. Her signature on withdrawal slips. He's already filed the report. Federal charges. You thought you were punishing me. Instead, you gutted your father's business. You didn't just end our marriage, you ended your place in his family. Tears welled, but I didn't see guilt. I saw fear. Pure choking fear. Noah, listen to me. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought you were lying to me, hiding assets, planning to leave with someone else. I panicked. Please, please help me. I shook my head slowly. The army taught me how to survive in silence, how to move unseen, how to endure betrayal from enemies. But nothing prepared me for betrayal from the woman I trusted most. And now you want me to cover for you? She reached for my hand, shackles clinking against the table. What about us? 8 years, Noah. Doesn't that mean anything? I pulled my hand back. You ended us when you left that note. You ended your family ties when you robbed your father blind. And you ended your own future when you decided revenge mattered more than loyalty. Her tears broke, then loud, ugly sobs that echoed in the room. Not the pretty tears she used to use when she wanted something. These were the cries of someone who finally realized the ground beneath her had given way. I stood, pushing the chair back. You abandoned me, Lydia. And now you've abandoned yourself. She screamed my name as the guard opened the door, but I didn't turn back. I'd stared into enough wreckage in my career to know when something couldn't be rebuilt. And Lydia Strickland was beyond repair. The courthouse in Raleigh was packed the morning Lydia's trial began. Reporters hovered on the steps like vultures, cameras snapping as though she were a celebrity instead of a defendant. To them, it was a scandal, a decorated colonel's daughter stealing hundreds of thousands from her own bloodline. To me, it was just the natural consequence of every choice she'd made. Inside, the air buzzed with whispers. Lydia walked in with her public defender, her wrists unshackled but her steps small, hesitant. She tried to clean herself up, hair pulled back, a plain gray suit borrowed from her brother Caleb. But she looked hollow. The glamour she'd once weaponized was gone. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. State versus Lydia Strickland. Charges: grand theft, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The prosecutor wasted no time. They laid it all out like a mission brief. Bank records documenting every withdrawal. Surveillance footage of Lydia sliding IDs across counters, walking out with envelopes stuffed with cash. Credit card receipts for spa retreats, jewelry, and a Charleston penthouse. Phone logs tying her to Captain Marcus Denton, who now sat behind his own lawyer at the defense table. Denton had cracked early, flipping his testimony to save his uniform. She planned it, he said, voice flat. She knew the account numbers. She told me it was her husband's money. She said she wanted to ruin him before he ruined her. The words were a knife twisted in front of everyone. Lydia stared at him with wide, betrayed eyes, but Denton didn't look back. He'd already saved his own skin. Then came the family. The colonel took the stand first. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried years of hurt. That account was meant for equipment purchases. 12 jobs. Payroll for families who depend on us. She didn't just steal from me. She stole from them. The jury leaned forward, listening. Marlene, his sister, followed, her hands trembling as she held up bank statements. We thought it was bookkeeping errors. But it was Lydia testing how much she could get away with. I defended her for years. I can't anymore. Even Caleb testified, his voice thick with grief. She's my sister. I love her. But love doesn't erase what she did. She knew what she was doing. Each word from her own blood cut her deeper than anything the prosecution could have crafted. Lydia sat rigid at the defense table, tears streaking her face, shaking her head as if denial alone could erase the evidence stacked against her. Her attorney tried, of course. Claimed she was emotionally unstable, convinced Noah was hiding assets, that she acted out of fear. But the jury didn't buy it. Not with the footage, the receipts, the signatures, the timestamps. I sat in the gallery behind the colonel, silent. I didn't need to testify. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. But when Lydia's eyes finally met mine across the room, I held her gaze without flinching. She'd expected me to look away, to soften, to show even a flicker of the man who once forgave her impulsiveness. But I didn't. Because the Army taught me something Lydia never understood. Actions have consequences. You can't talk your way out of bad intel. You can't cry your way out of an ambush. You either survive your choices or you don't. And Lydia was learning that lesson in front of the whole world. 3 months after her arrest, the trial wrapped. The evidence was overwhelming, her defense flimsy at best. Now the only question left was what the judge would decide. The courtroom was quiet that morning, tension humming like the moment before a firefight. The colonel sat in the front row, ramrod straight in his suit, face unreadable. Marlene and Caleb were beside him, their eyes red but dry. I sat a few rows back, my uniform pressed, my hands still, my mind clear. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise." Judge Morrison entered, black robes swaying, her face stern. She didn't waste time. On the charges of grand theft, fraud, embezzlement and conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. The word echoed. Lydia's head dropped forward like the weight of it finally broke her neck. The judge continued. Sentencing: 5 years in state prison, restitution of $160,000 and court costs. Eligibility for parole after 3 years. Marlene let out a sharp breath. Caleb closed his eyes. The colonel didn't move. He sat like a statue carved from granite, hands folded, jaw locked. The bailiff stepped forward, cuffs gleaming in the harsh light. Lydia stood slowly, legs trembling. She wore the same gray suit Caleb had brought her months earlier, but it hung loose now, her face gaunt, her once bright eyes dull. "Your Honor," Lydia whispered, voice cracking, "please? I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. The judge raised a hand, silencing her. "You had months to think. You had opportunities to stop. But you didn't. You acted deliberately, repeatedly, and recklessly. This court doesn't deal in apologies. It deals in accountability." The gavel struck wood, sharp as a rifle shot. Lydia turned then, looking not at her lawyer, not at Denton, who sat pale and broken behind his own counsel, but at her father. "Daddy, I'm sorry. Please, help me." The colonel's face never changed. No nod, no shake of the head. Just silence. The kind of silence that carries more weight than any words. Then her eyes found mine. For a heartbeat, I saw the woman I used to know. The one who laughed in the kitchen late at night, who kissed me before every deployment, who once swore we were unbreakable. But that woman was long gone, replaced by the thief who left me with a note about upgrading. I didn't flinch. The bailiff cuffed her wrists, the metallic click echoing through the courtroom. She stumbled as they led her toward the side door, the chains rattling with every step. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked, and Lydia Strickland, once the colonel's daughter, once my wife, vanished through a door she wouldn't walk back out of for years. As the door shut behind her, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Then the judge spoke one last time. "Court is adjourned." The gavel came down again, sealing her fate. I exhaled slowly, the weight I'd carried for months lifting just enough to breathe. Betrayal cuts deep, but justice cuts cleaner. Outside, the sun was sharp against the courthouse steps. The colonel paused beside me, his shoulders heavy but unbowed. "It's finished," he said quietly. I nodded. She destroyed herself. We didn't have to lift a hand. He looked at me, eyes full of a sorrow I'd never wish on another man. Sometimes the hardest part of command isn't the enemy in front of you. It's the traitor behind you. I understood. And I knew Lydia's sentence wasn't just years behind bars. Her real sentence was the silence of everyone she'd once had, and lost forever. 6 months after the sentencing, life had found its rhythm again. Not normal, nothing ever goes back to normal after betrayal, but steady like a soldier's march after a firefight. The colonel had salvaged his company. It took refinancing, long nights, and a few favors from old Army contacts. But payroll was met, contracts held, and the expansion project he'd once feared lost was back on track. 2 of the employees laid off had already been rehired. The plant buzzed with the sound of machines again, and for the first time in months, he looked less like a man carrying the world and more like the leader I'd always known. As for me, the divorce had gone through clean. The house was quiet, but it was mine. My name was clear, my record untouched. The army still had use for me, recon never goes out of style, but I carried myself lighter now. The shadow that had followed me into every room, every deployment, was gone. One evening, I sat with the colonel in his office, the smell of bourbon and old leather filling the air. He raised his glass, his voice gravelly but steady. "You're still family, Noah. More than she's been in a long time. When you decide to hang up the uniform, I want you here. At Holloway Defense. Men like you don't just build companies. You protect them." I didn't answer right away. I thought about the empty kitchen where I'd first found her note. About the courtroom where I'd watched her beg her father for mercy he couldn't give. About the quiet nights now, where I slept without wondering whose voice she was whispering to on the phone. Finally, I nodded. "I'll think about it." The colonel smiled faintly, the closest thing to peace I'd seen in his face since the day the theft was uncovered. Meanwhile, Lydia sat in a cell. I didn't visit, but word traveled. Her appeals were denied. Caleb stopped answering her letters. Marlene refused to take her calls. The colonel never spoke her name again. In the eyes of the family, she no longer existed. And Captain Denton? Dishonorable discharge. Career dead before it even began. The upgrade she thought she was chasing had turned out to be a man without a uniform, without a paycheck, without a future. I kept her note though. Not out of nostalgia. Out of irony. Upgrading to someone younger, better in bed. She thought she was leaving me for an upgrade. But in the end, I was the one who upgraded, to freedom, to peace, to a life without lies. She traded vows and family for shackles and silence. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It isn't fire or fury or a fist to the jaw. Sometimes revenge is quiet. It's survival. It's watching the person who tried to destroy you crumble under the weight of their own choices. And as I sat there, bourbon in hand, the colonel across from me, and the hum of the plant carrying through the night air, I realized something simple. Lydia thought betrayal would break me. Instead, it forged me. When the noise fades, the courtroom gavel, the headlines, even the sound of chains rattling as she was led away, what's left is silence. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that steadies. The kind you hear when the battle is over and you realize you're still standing. I've walked through jungles where the only company was the hum of insects and the weight of my rifle. I've waited in the dark for days, patient, quiet, invisible. Recon teaches you that silence isn't weakness. It's power. It's survival. And that's what betrayal leaves you with if you let it. Not ruin. Not defeat. Just silence and the choice of what you do with it. Lydia made her choice. She chose impulse over loyalty, greed over family, revenge over love. She wrote her fate in the same handwriting that left me that note on the kitchen counter. The words were cruel, but the irony was sharper. She thought she was upgrading. All she did was trade a marriage, a father's trust, and a future for 4 gray walls and time that doesn't move. But I chose differently. I chose to survive it. To outlast it. To carry the weight without letting it crush me. And survival, I've learned, is the greatest revenge there is. Because in the end, betrayal isn't about what someone takes from you. It's about what you refuse to let them steal. My honor. My name. My future. She couldn't touch those no matter how hard she tried. Now the house is quiet, but it's my quiet. The colonel's company hums with life again, and every machine that roars back to work is proof that her theft didn't win. I'm still in uniform, still steady, still the man she tried to break. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with fire or fury. Sometimes it comes in the stillness afterward when you realize you've upgraded, not to someone new, not to something shinier, but to a life without lies, without betrayal, without dead weight dragging you down. And that's the part she'll never understand. Because the moment she left that note, she thought she was free. But the truth is simple. I'm the one who walked away free.